Welcome to Module 2's YouTube. I hope you found the first one useful. I was told by my technician that I ought to shut up before I reach across to turn off the camera, so I'll do that this time, just to be different. Okay, I've looked at the questions for Module 2 that Group 1 put up. They're excellent. So go ahead and respond. Remember what I've said. You only need to respond to one, repeat one of the questions. I'd rather have a little bit more development and a little bit less trying to go through everything. So pick one that attracts you, the easiest way to do it. Okay, let's just kind of put these two theories, situational leadership and path goal, in some kind of context. Some of the names that you will run into when you start to look at this stuff, depending on the kind of research you do, either for your final project here or if you go on to a doctorate, keep in mind the name Fred Fiedler. He is probably the best known situational leadership theorist out there, and he fits in very well with what Navarez and Wood are doing. So Fred Fiedler, keep him in mind. Another gentleman very well known in the path goal theory is Bernard Bass. So look for Dr. Bass's material. Doesn't fit quite as well with our friends from Navarez and Wood, but it's still pretty close. You could probably slide it into one of the frames pretty easily with Bowman and Deal. Okay, if you take a look at the chart on page 40 in Navarez and Wood, it ties in very nicely to the slides that I put on for to lead into Module 2. Okay, now let's move. That's pretty much what I need to say. You have some good instructions as to what to do with Navarez and Wood. But let's move into the Bowman and Deal book for a minute. They are pretty much focused, or more focused, on situational leadership. The reason being, their four frames, or mixtures thereof, work extremely well when you're working with the idea of situational leadership, because situations always change. Path goal is a little more structured. So I can't honestly say I've ever done much with path goal. I do know Bernard Bass' work fairly well, but I've never really used it in any research that I've done. A term that you'll find in Bowman and Deal that I really like is called social architecture. When you look at that section of their book, really pay close attention, because that helps you understand what's going on with organizational cultures. The architecture is a structural aspect of the organization, and making the culture, if you will, I'm using an old biological term, making the culture the interstitial material that holds that architecture together. So it's kind of worth paying some attention to it. I've always liked what they did with that. Okay, when you look at Chapter 5 in Bowman and Deal, examine both the task and the orientation aspects. The task relates very closely to the structure. I'm going to give you a very quick example. I am very interested in the auto industry for a good long time, primarily having worked in Detroit and even working on the west side of Michigan when I was in school. I got a chance to see the auto industry up close and personal. There was a very interesting example. Volvo has always sold itself as being one of the most quality conscious automobile companies that you'll ever find. And for a period of time in the early 80s, they were having some serious difficulty with quality control. And one of the things that came out of that was they had been running a traditional American-style linear or horizontal assembly line. And after doing a lot of focus group work with their employees, they said, "Can you tell us what's wrong?" He said, "Well, we've lost a sense of identification with the car that we make. I may only deal with assembly of wheel components, or assembly of doors, or assembly of trunk components, and I don't really ever get a sense of the complete vehicle." So what they did was, rather than having the vehicles go by linearly, if you will, they went ahead and created a team. They put the team in a pod, and they brought to that pod all of the components and the basic frame. And that had an amazing effect. The individuals could begin again to identify, well, this is a vehicle that I made. And so they were assembling them. Actually, they got the cars done more quickly, and they also came up with a much stronger product. So this whole idea of task orientation needs to be supported by the structure of the organization. Okay. One of the things I want you to pay attention to when you look at scoring for the situational models, and where you're asked to score and get your own scores for each of them, one of the more interesting things about situational leadership is that the way they've broken it down, you've got a couple things to deal with. You deal with a structural side and a functional side. The structural side is pretty much that. It fits into what Bowman and Deal call structural frame, and that's pretty easy to understand. It's rather interesting, though, when you do the scoring on the functional side, what you see is you're largely dealing with their frame that covers human resources. And the whole thing, and many of you have said this in material you've turned in, that you have to mix. There's no situation, and I would tend to agree with you completely. There's going to be a little noise here for a while, so just to be patient. I do this in a facility where I don't control who does what, when. Okay, that human resources gives you much more of a personalistic view, which I consider to be very, very critical. Okay, one thing I would like, when you answer your questions, you've been very good. You've largely been dealing with them out of personal experience, which I did ask you to do, or kind of dealing with the contextual that the author provided. What would be helpful for me would be if you would, when you're looking at the questions, whether they're out of Navarez and Wood or out of the ones that you're putting up on the blackboard, I'm sorry, yeah, it's blackboard. Try to talk a little bit, if you would, about what leadership theory or combination of theories you see undergirding or providing the foundation for that particular response that you give. That would certainly make it clearer when I get a chance to see how well you're internalizing some of this thinking. Okay, something else that I've talked to one or two of you about it. I think I did send out something of an email, and I think I better reiterate it just so no one gets confused. The way that it's Dr. Link, the way he set up our score board, if you will, is not very efficient this time. I don't know why he did it. Rather than hassling him, he's got a lot of courses going all at once. He's sort of our technical expert. He didn't give, at the end of each module, a place for a score on your responses, discussion responses. So you've got a little bit of an issue there. When it comes to the turning in the questions, I'll get an email out. I haven't gotten it out yet. I'll get it out later today to Group 1. Today happens to be Thursday, by the way, when I'm doing this. To Group 1, telling them what a high-quality job they did on the questions. And that is their responsibility. They do not have to answer. They do have to respond to two of you from Group 2 who have responded to one of the questions. But I have to warehouse all that data. And what I tend to do is to send out emails. I haven't done it yet, but I will. I want to let you know ahead of time. I will warehouse your scores. If any of you have a problem with any of this, I will get back to you immediately, because I don't consider this to be a one-and-done thing. I consider this to largely be not yet in process. So if you come up with an answer and I have some questions or would like to see more development, I'll let you know that. And when you've done, when you've responded, when you've submitted your questions, which Group 1 is now done, and then you've done the two responses, then you're finished for that module. And what I will do basically is get back to you as you finish them. So hopefully that's not overly confusing. The other thing that I always ask right about this time in the course is, okay, yeah, believe it or not, we're 40% of the way through. 2 modules of 5 is 40%. It's time, very much time, for you to now take a look at your final synthesis assignment. That will be much more meaningful for you, will have much more meaning for you if you start to think about it now. You've been through several different approaches to theory. I've given you a kind of an overview with one of my sets of slides on all of the theories we will ask you to look at throughout the degree. And by now you ought to have kind of a sense of what theories are going to move you as you go forward into your work on that final project. So please, gentle reminder, I'd really appreciate it if you would look at them, because this way it'll also give you the opportunity, if you have any questions, we can discuss them now. It gets to be a little unnerving if you suddenly open it up on Module 5 and I don't understand this, what does he want? And then I have to try to deal simultaneously with all of you. If you have questions now and you sort of set your plan, then I'll be able to deal with all of you, give you all the time you so richly deserve. Okay, I'm going to finish a little short this time, not very many. It looks like I'm over, I'm sorry. So, thank you again for a good job through the first module. I look forward to an equal one in the second module.